From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
It's lining up to be a very different election year for Congressman Seth Magaziner. Right now, forecasters give the freshman lawmaker strong odds of winning re-election after a grueling 2022 campaign against Republican Alan Fung. His first year in office was largely overshadowed by another congressional campaign, the surprise race to replace David Cicilline, ultimately won by Congressman Gabe Amo. What are Magaziner's priorities as he settles into the job, and how can he be effective in a chaotic House of Representatives? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, Congressman Seth Magaziner. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nisi. Congressman Seth Magaziner, welcome back to the program.
Great to be here. Have you. Thanks for having me back.
Let's start with the presidential primary that Rhode Islanders just voted in. The results show 14.5% of voters statewide voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary, 29% in Providence alone. Now, it's important to note that this was less than 4,000 uncommitted votes that were cast. Nonetheless, this was clearly a protest vote by an organized group that wanted to send a message here about President Biden's handling of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. If you were in a room with these voters, what would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would say is that Joe Biden absolutely has to be reelected this year, and Donald Trump cannot be president again. You know, President Biden has built a record of delivering real results for working people, passing the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the PACT Act for veterans, protecting Social Security, protecting abortion rights. Donald Trump is the president who's
we get the political
for
talking. We get those, okay, but this is about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
What I would say
and
is
their
this.
concerns there.
What I would say is this: is that their frustrations are absolutely valid. I think we are all deeply disturbed by the humanitarian toll of the war in Gaza, and their frustrations are absolutely understandable, and they deserve to be heard. What I will say is that both here in Rhode Island and in Washington, when I talk to people who voted uncommitted in the presidential primary, to a person, every one of them have told me that they intend to vote for Joe Biden in November. Yes, they wanted to make this protest because they want to push the administration to do more to end the war in Gaza, but they understand that Joe Biden is the president who cares about the Palestinian people, cares about the Israeli people, and cares about American working people as well. Donald Trump cares only about himself. So when you see both in Rhode Island and Washington leaders, encouraging people to vote uncommitted in the primary, virtually all of them are saying very clearly that they are going to vote for Joe Biden in November because they understand what the stakes of this election are.
Members of the Massachusetts delegation, I'd say, have been a bit more out front on pushing back at Biden on various policies around Israel. How much do you feel like you can't get too far out on this because you have to be deferential to Senator Reid because of his position as chairman of the Armed Services Committee?
Well, I've been clear from back in the fall that I think that Israel needs to address this war in a different way and be more targeted in going after Hamas and doing more to avoid civilian casualties and allow humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. I've also been calling, as the president has, for a bilateral ceasefire that involves the return of hostages. What Hamas did on October 7th was absolutely horrific, but the humanitarian toll in Gaza is horrific as well. So I commend the administration for trying to push some very difficult players, both on the Hamas side and in the Israeli government, to get to the table, to get to a ceasefire that involves the return of the hostages, so that we can get on a path toward a long-term peace. A long-term peace, which in my view has to involve a two-state solution.
One more question on this. Last night, Axios reported that a group of progressive lawmakers are circulating a letter in the House that would go to Biden calling to halt weapons transfers to Israel over that strike on the World Central Kitchen humanitarian workers. Do you plan to sign that letter?
I'll take a look at it, but listen, it's important for people to understand that Hamas broke the last ceasefire, and Hamas has shown no real interest in engaging in negotiations for a new ceasefire. So any ceasefire has to involve both parties, not just one. That being said, I have been vocal for months now that I do not believe that Israel is being targeted enough in the way that it's conducting the war. And I don't think that American aid should be unconditional.
So you think there should be conditions on the military aid that America sends to Israel?
I think it's something we have to look at. Now, there's different kinds of weapons, right? I mean, I will always vote to support Iron Dome and weaponry that will help Israel defend itself, from offensive attacks from Hamas, Hezbollah, or other actors in the region. But we need to be clear with the Israeli government that the humanitarian toll and the level of civilian casualties in Gaza is unacceptable.
I actually do have one more question on this. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer gave a speech last month that got a lot of attention, essentially calling for Israel to hold a new election because Benjamin Netanyahu has, quote, lost his way. Do you agree with Leader Schumer, or did he take it too far?
So listen, there are 8 million Israelis in the Middle East. There are 7 million Palestinians. Neither group is going anywhere. And so the only long-term solution is a two-state solution where both Israelis and Palestinians can live with peace and self-determination.
Schumer's call for a new election. Right. What do you think?
So what Senator Schumer was talking about is, in part, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has taken a two-state solution off the table. That is very damaging to the peace process and ultimately puts Israelis at risk. And so there's a reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost the support of most Israelis. He has not done enough to keep Israel safe. He has not conducted the war in an appropriate way, and he needs to show a commitment to a plan for peace, which so far he has not.
Let's talk about your workplace, the United States House of Representatives. On some level, you're a spectator for a lot of the chaos that's been going on in the House because it's happening kind of within the Republican majority. But you don't really have a comparison since you're a freshman, so I can't ask you how it's changed. But how much is the strife about leadership and these constant threats to get rid of the speaker and the disagreements we see within the Republican caucus, how much is it affecting the day-to-day mood and productivity in the House, including efforts that you might hope could be bipartisan?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the least productive Congress in a century. Has passed fewer bills than any Congress in almost 100 years because there is so much dysfunction in the Republican caucus. They are constantly fighting with each other, arguing with each other, threatening each other, running primary candidates against each other, and it does make it hard to get things done. There are things that we could be doing to help Americans and make our country safer that have broad bipartisan support that aren't going up for votes just because the House is so dysfunctional. We know that, for example, things like expanding the child tax credit, things like supporting our allies in Ukraine and around the world have broad bipartisan support, and it's been hard to get votes even on these very bipartisan issues because the far right essentially owns a veto over the Speaker of the House and what agenda goes to the floor.
Speaking of that, he referenced it. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has filed a motion to oust House Speaker Mike Johnson, but she hasn't called for a vote yet. And I read in Punchbowl this morning that the two might be talking, so we'll see what comes out of that. But if the ultra-conservative wing of the House does move to push Johnson out of the speakership like we have seen before, there's been talk that Democrats might come to his aid and save him. Would you be open to voting for Mike Johnson?
Mike Johnson needs to stand up and be a leader, right? He needs to be a leader. He needs to put a Ukraine funding package on the floor. He needs to work with Democrats on a bipartisan budget so that we don't have more shutdown threats like we've been dealing with for the last year and a half. If he wants Democratic help, then he needs to govern in a bipartisan way and not just cater to the Marjorie Taylor Greene wing of his party. Listen, House Democrats are always open to having a conversation, right? I mean, our leader, Hakeem Jeffries on the Democratic side, has been clear that he is always open to having a conversation with Mike Johnson. But that being said, Mike Johnson needs to stand up and be a leader and take action to make Americans more safe by supporting Ukraine and Taiwan and our other allies around the world. He needs to stand up and be a leader by saying to the Marjorie Taylor Greene wing of his party, we are not going to have government shutdowns this year, and be responsible. If he does that, we'll have a conversation, but he needs to show that he's willing to step up, be a leader, and be bipartisan.
Just about a minute left before we go to a break, and I want to pivot local. Back to Rhode Island, the bridge, Washington Bridge, westbound. We don't need to give the headlines here. Everybody knows about it. How worried are you for the prospects of federal funding for the bridge if Biden doesn't win?
Well, if Biden doesn't win, then we're going to have a lot of problems. But I mean, Donald Trump promised infrastructure week for 4 years, and it never came. It was President Biden that got a big infrastructure bill passed. So, of course, President Biden is doing more and has a better track record of delivering infrastructure funding than President Trump ever did. So, of course, that would be concerning.
Are you talking to state leaders here, as Jack Reed has suggested in news releases, we need a plan, and we need a plan now so we know what to ask for? Are you sending the same message?
Yeah, so obviously the closure of the Washington Bridge is extremely frustrating for all Rhode Islanders. In the federal delegation, we are committed to getting every dollar we possibly can to get that bridge rebuilt as quickly and safely as possible, but we do need a more specific plan from the state on the scope of the work and the cost so that we can go and secure that funding.
Just 15 seconds before we go to break. Any chance Rhode Island can jump on one of the Baltimore bridge bills and get some money through that avenue?
We are going to pursue every legislative avenue we can find to get that funding to Rhode Island.
All right, we're going to take a break on the program. When we come back, this is not something I say all that often, Congressman Magaziner went viral. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is Congressman Seth Magaziner from Rhode Island's 2nd Congressional District. Congressman, some personal news. You and your wife are expecting a second baby on the way, just a few weeks.
Yeah,
is that right? To join young Max, who's 2.5 years old, and we understand you're planning to take some time off.
Yeah, no, my wife and I were very excited to welcome our second child soon, and I am going to take a parental leave. As you know, both in the State House when I was state treasurer and also in Congress, I've been a big advocate for parental leave for all parents nationally. So I'm going to take some time to be a father and a husband as we welcome our new child. That being said, my office will remain open and will continue to be responsive to constituents. And I've communicated to our leadership that if there's an essential vote, a vote like Ukraine funding or to avoid government shutdown, which wouldn't happen in the next 6 weeks anyway, that I'll go down to do that, of course. But I'm going to try my best to protect this time for the month or so after my next child is born.
Is that how long it'll be? About a month you'll be on paternity leave, or 6 weeks? What?
Yeah, I'm going to shoot for 6 weeks. We'll
see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens.
Just to peel back the curtain for a sec, this has been a fairly rapid change in society with men taking time. Tim and I have talked about when his kids were born in the late 2000s. You've always said it wasn't really even a discussion that dad would get leave.
That's right.
I took time with my daughter. What do you say to there? I'm sure there might be some viewers who, aren't used to this concept and say, well, why does dad need leave? What's going on? What is your argument for that?
I just say that there's a growing body of research that it is best for the health of the child for both parents to be present and to be able to have that early bonding time together. And this is becoming more normalized, and it should be. I've talked to some of the other young members of Congress who have young kids, and have
I think Congressman Auchincloss too.
Yeah, Auchincloss, Gallego from Arizona, Jimmy Gomez from California. So I did ask around to kind of see what others had done recently, and this seems to be the new standard that's developing. So I'm going to do the same, and again, I believe it should be the standard for all Americans.
So as I teased going into the break, you had quite the exchange with hard-right conservative Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene that went viral. Let's just take a short listen to that clip.
Let's talk about Border Patrol apprehensions between ports of entry at the southwest border of terrorists.
And I have to say, it is pretty rich hearing the gentleman from Georgia express her concern about terrorism when she literally was selling defund the FBI t-shirts and hats on her website. The leading law enforcement agency tasked with combating terrorism in this country and keeping people safe. And she wants to defund it. So I am not going to take any lectures from her on securing this homeland from terror.
That video got a lot of attention nationally there. And look, you're taking on one of Trump's biggest supporters in the House, coupled with, I think it was last week, right? You sat down with Benny Thompson. You brought the January 6th chairperson to Rhode Island, and Ted got a one-on-two with you and the congressman there. It feels like you've made this tone a big part of what you're tackling in Congress.
Well, this is the problem with the Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump wing of the Republican Party right now, is that they are totally fine with lawlessness and violence as long as it is under the Trump banner, right? On January 6th, an armed mob attacked police officers. Police officers died, in the days following that. Donald Trump himself has been indicted on nearly 100 criminal counts. And their view is, as long as it's Donald Trump or his supporters, the law doesn't apply to you. That's wrong, and it's dangerous. And no, we have to make sure that we don't have another January 6th. I'm a member of the Homeland Security Committee. That's where that clip came from. We were debating how to protect America from terrorism, which is obviously an important topic. But protecting America from terrorism means all types of terror, and violent mobs that attack police officers and threaten acts of violence like kidnapping the governor of Michigan. That is not okay, and I'm not going to let Marjorie Taylor Greene or anyone else normalize political violence in this country.
And yet we just saw this week a Wall Street Journal poll with President Biden, who you've been talking up throughout this show, horrible numbers for him out in the swing states. Not that his numbers are great even in blue states like Rhode Island. And frankly, he's down in the polls to Donald Trump. So, every American saw January 6th. What do you make of the fact that clearly a lot of people do not agree with you that is a firing offense for Donald Trump?
It should be, but listen, as we get closer to this election, we're going to make sure that people understand the stakes. This is the first election in any of our lifetimes where both candidates have been president before. So we know what we're getting, right? And with President Biden, you got real results. Biggest infrastructure bill in a generation, PACT Act to help veterans, Inflation Reduction Act, which is lowering the cost of prescription drugs for seniors.
High inflation, messy withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Lowest unemployment in modern history. Inflation is coming back down. Someone who's fighting for working people. With Donald Trump, we had 4 years of chaos and division. He is the president responsible for overturning Roe versus Wade, which protected abortion rights in this country. He brags about it. He tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act, came within one vote of doing that, and 40 million Americans would have lost their health insurance, including tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders. And yes, he is the first president in history, Donald Trump, who refused to abide by the peaceful transfer of power when the voters elected someone else to replace him. So the stakes are incredibly high, and I do have confidence that as we get closer to November and that choice crystallizes in people's minds, that Joe Biden will win re-election, as he should.
I want to have you wear your old hat as you were, I'm sure our viewers remember, you were general treasurer in Rhode Island, and there's a push to restore retiree annual cost of living adjustments that were frozen under pension reform. What do you think? Is it time to reinstate those? The COLAs?
So I haven't been close to this issue in almost 2 years now, so I'm not up to date on the data. But I do know that in the 8 years that I was state treasurer, the health of the pension system improved significantly. The funded status went up significantly. We made strong investment returns pretty consistently during that 8-year period. So I'm not surprised that this conversation is happening now, because the pension fund certainly was stronger when I left office than it was, a decade earlier. I'm not close enough to it now to know what, if any, changes are appropriate, but it's understandable that people are looking to have this conversation.
But if nothing else, you don't think it should be verboten to discuss making changes, potentially looking at restoring some of the benefits that were frozen, at least to discuss it?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at options, but obviously you have to balance what is good for workers and retirees with the overall health of the system. And when I took office, again, the system was very underfunded, had been chronically underperforming its peers in investment returns. We were not in a place then when we could talk about changes to benefits. I don't know if we're in that place today or not. The new treasurer would have a better idea of that than I do, but I do know that the system is a lot healthier today than it was back then.
You gave a comment not too long ago to one of the reporters in Washington that caught my eye. You were talking about the border and immigration because, as you said, it comes up in your committee, the Homeland Security Committee, a lot. And you, while saying the usual stuff you say as a Democrat, you did have a little bit of a warning, it sounded like, to your party, saying, we have to make sure we're not underplaying that there is I don't know if you used the word crisis, but there are problems at the border, however you phrase it. Can you just expand on that and kind of how you view that within the Democratic fold?
Yeah, absolutely. I've spent a lot of time on this. As a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I spent a lot of time studying the challenges at the southern border over the last year. I went down to the southern border myself last year and talked with Border Patrol and Customs and Immigration and community groups working along the southern border. My biggest takeaway was they need more resources across the board. President Biden back in October asked for $14 billion of supplemental funding to hire more Border Patrol, more Customs Immigration, to increase detention capacity, among other things. Unfortunately, House Republicans have been sitting on that request for 6 months now. They need the resources, they need the funding, and we should give it to them. And the reason that House Republicans are sitting on that funding is because Donald Trump told them to. Donald Trump and the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, they want a problem, not a solution.
Your point is taken, but my point is you did have a warning to other Democrats that I read.
Yes. No, I mean, there are absolutely challenges at the border that we need to take seriously. I think that starts with approving the funding request that President Biden made back in October that House Republicans have been sitting on at the behest of Donald Trump, who wants to campaign on a problem instead of work on a solution.
All right, we have less than a minute left here, Congressman. Should the public be holding their breath that Congress will take up the bill for aid to Ukraine next week, this coming week, I should say, since most are watching on a Sunday?
Speaker Johnson has said that we will take up Ukraine funding when we get back from the Easter break. We are going to do everything we can to hold them to that. The Ukrainians cannot hold out much longer without our help, so we've got to get it done.
Congressman Seth Magaziner, thanks so much for joining us on Newsmakers.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Earlier this week, my colleague Alexandra Leslie spotted a document on the DOT's Washington Bridge website. It was labeled as a memo outlining a policy for enhanced inspections of bridges that the state has deemed, quote, complex. After we asked about it, the document was removed from the website with the explanation that they had accidentally posted a draft document. But the incident revealed that the state is taking a much harder look at this group of bridges. A spokesperson told Alex they have identified a dozen complex bridges in the state, and they have conducted 9 enhanced inspections on them. The spokesperson said the inspections found, quote, no significant findings. Another 44 priority bridges have also been identified for additional inspections. Now, RIDOT acknowledges these special inspections were prompted by the abrupt closure of the Washington Bridge. Alex caught up with Governor Dan McKee at the opening of the home show at the Rhode Island Convention Center this week.
The fact that there's a more intensive inspection process happening, an acknowledgement that the July inspection of the Washington Bridge was not enough or not accurate at the time?
No, I think what it says is that this is just, a belt and suspender to kind of make sure that we confirm what we believe to be true. But we're gonna do that work to make sure that the general public has confidence in when they go over a bridge.
You can watch Alex Leslie's full report under the Target 12 page of WPRI.com. That's also, you can watch Newsmakers if you missed any of it, and our conversation with Congressman Seth Magaziner. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.